Pete Blackshaw. I'm CEO of Centrifuge. I'm not actually at Union Hall, but I hope that you think that I am. I'm trying to, you know, walk the talk on the virtual environment. But we're going to have, I think, a really exciting session. I hope you throw a lot of questions. And about a year ago, shortly after I got here, I spent some time with Fred at Hinge Global. I was really excited that kind of a leading, e-commerce marketing firm was right in our backyard. And you've heard me talk a lot about firms like Amify and the whole great supply way that's wrapping around our airport. And I just thought it would be a great opportunity to kind of end the year, a very disruptive year, a year where we couldn't write the script, by talking about e-commerce innovations. And and by the way, my history with Kathy goes way back. I mean, it's such a small world. We both worked at Nielsen. Last time I saw her was when I was in leading digital in Nestle in Switzerland. And so it's good to have you back as well.
Thank you.
But what I thought we would do is I'll let Kathy and Fred introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of go through a few introductory slides, and then we're going to pause, and I'm going to be a little bit of a talk show host. And then if there are some questions, we'll do some rapid fire engagement. But I think you'll find this to be a really engaging and timely topic. And we will record this in case you want to share it with your stakeholders. So let me start by, let's have some introductions. Kathy and Fred. Who wants to go first?
Fred, do you want to start?
Fred's looking frozen. So Kathy, you have.
All right, I will. So as Pete said, he and I have known each other a long time, multiple decades, but he's looking younger than ever. So that's great. So I lead the data analytics at Hinge. I also wear a second hat. I am also heading up corporate marketing. But it's with the data hat that I'm actually coming to you today. I'll share a lot of insights around what's driving growth in e-commerce and what are some of the things and trends that we're seeing, especially as it relates to new brands and new products, kind of using e-commerce as a way of accelerating their own growth. But Pete and I actually started our careers at P&G.
Oh, that's
so
right.
Yeah, I think he was on the Pampers business, and I was running research for all the baby care at the time. So it's pretty interesting stuff. But anyway, so I'm thrilled to be here.
You want to say a few words about your boss while he's trying to Wi-Fi in?
Yeah, so Fred Killingsworth is our founder and CEO. So he actually started Hinge Global about 5 years ago. And he actually comes with a background of enterprise sales at Verizon and a number of sort of big tech companies. But he ended up at Amazon running enterprise sales there at Amazon. And while he was there, he just recognized how complicated e-commerce is and how much frustration there is that sellers and brands face when trying to really optimize their businesses on Amazon. So he sort of used that as inspiration to start Hinge Global as really a way of giving companies an opportunity to really access a group of sort of expert e-commerce sellers. So we basically become the arm of the e-commerce arm for a lot of brands and companies, and basically, streamline that whole process.
Fred, I don't think we need you, but if you want to add anything else. Uh-oh.
I can't get audio working.
There you go.
Still no dice. You got me now?
Yeah.
No?
Get best tweet in before you freeze you again.
Yeah, that's good, because I kind of wanted to see what Kathy would say about me in public, so I appreciate that. And we appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with you. We started the company here in Cincinnati 5 years ago. Candidly, I didn't want to move anymore. We got to Cincinnati, and such a great town, and commuted back and forth from here to Seattle every week for a while, doing international expansion strategy. And as Kathy said, we thought we could help companies, regardless of size, establish, manage, and grow their business online. We've certainly started at Amazon and now have expanded across multiple digital channels. So really excited to talk about what we're seeing, the experience, and hopefully how we can help anyone kind of gain a nugget today.
Fantastic. Well, let's jump into, what do you see for 2021?
Well, so as we talk about 2021, I think that there's sort of this whole piece of like, all the trends as you started out with, Pete. It's been a very disruptive year. What we are seeing is just more connectivity. I mean, the fact that we're all sitting around the world and very comfortable on a Zoom call. My grandma is on Zoom, so hyper connected. But at the same time, we're also socially distanced. We're seeing a lot of influencer marketing, and in the world of e-commerce, that becomes very critical. We'll talk about early reviewers and influencers in a little bit later. But obviously then the flip side is we're going to expect to see a lot less experiential marketing, live events, things like that. There's a lot more focus on family and pets and all the things associated with nesting. There's some really interesting product opportunities that come about as a result of all of this nesting that you don't necessarily expect. I mean, even in March, we were seeing this emergence of gardening, right? Gardening being a big thing, and yeast and, homemade pasta and all that kind of stuff. So just there are definitely some trends that have popped up that again, you wouldn't necessarily expect. I'll give you a really interesting one, office furniture. You wouldn't think office furniture would be taking off, but actually it is in a D2C environment. So this is people kind of setting up home offices now and buying really nice, comfortable office chairs that maybe in the past they would have left to a more commercial setting, but now they're kind of shifting all of that in home, and we're seeing a big spike in D2C office furniture. So another example of sort of this nesting dynamic. Of course, then the flip side is a lot less international travel. And a topic near and dear to your heart, Pete, is this growth and sustainability. And I'll broaden that to include what I'm calling conscious consumerism. So we're seeing this trend that hopefully will be a lasting one, where consumers are a lot more mindful of what they're buying, and they're buying it, they're looking for things with purpose. So a lot of cause-driven products, or products that are good for you or good for the environment or good for the family or good for the pet, sort of this very well-rounded notion. And then the flip side is we are seeing maybe a little bit of pushback towards what I'll call elitist luxury. So elitist luxury where it's sort of this like, closed gate, very, 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 very super premium items. People maybe are not feeling like that is as egalitarian as it could be. I talked about self-care and better for you. And then the flip side is like a lot less sort of salad bar, self-serve, grab your own, mochi or whatever, any of that kind of like open-ended, open the case and grab it yourself, that kind of stuff has really gone down. And then of course, e-commerce. Did you want to add anything, Pete?
No, I think you nailed it. I think the nesting part was really, really interesting. And I love the insight around the office space. It is true. I've really, the amount of time unfortunately I can't show you my space, but I put a lot of tender loving care into it. And it is true. You're kind of, you're probably more likely to spend on a premium, office thing than, maybe your own office at work. So that's a very interesting dynamic to follow. Nope, let's jump ahead.
So Fred, you want to talk about this one?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
The
All
Friday
right.
space really growing.
It's growing at an, not an alarming pace, but an amazing pace that I think, the vast majority of companies weren't prepared for. No one really could. But I think the big trend is, for CPG to grow at this rate online. It's hard to really prepare for that kind of shift in operational support, demand planning, the ability to forecast what's coming out. Has really been a game changer across a variety of industries. Obviously, CPG and personal care, lots of stuff that we'll get into in just a few minutes, but it's really been a magnificent year to accelerate innovation and the focus for a lot of brands and companies on what are the technology, people, and resources that we need in place to sustain and be able to support our consumers long term, because we believe we've actually are training, due to this kind of pandemic, we're training the consumer to shop in a different way, as you all probably know. And so we'll talk more about kind of the disruptive opportunities of where there are technology opportunities, marketing innovation opportunities, and product innovation opportunities that we think is super interesting for hopefully the vast majority of this audience.
What I find just captivating about this slide is I think about my Nestle meetings with top management, where we were kind of projecting out the growth of e-commerce. And I think we were assuming it would be 10 years before we got to that number. And that's what's so incredible about the last 6 months, is like everything has increased by a factor of 5. And it's both an opportunity, but it's also really scary if you're not prepared.
Exactly. That's right. You don't want to be left behind.
Yeah, no, there's indicators that are stressing, obviously, the traditional infrastructure of even just shipping, right? There's not enough capacity to move the products around the country on a timely basis. So a lot of industries are affected by this, not just, the product companies, but how do I actually leverage that concept of the convenience factor of what's come into play, or kind of required in some cases, like myself, where I'm quarantined for the next 6 or 7 more days. And so I want my stuff and I want it now. And who's going to bring it to me? Sorry to interrupt, Kathy. Go ahead.
And so this is an interesting slide. We see this, as you said, this big sort of growth in e-commerce. Now, it had been trucking along in this nice steady pace prior to COVID. And then as soon as, February and March hit, you see this huge spike where literally the sales on e-commerce for CPG has doubled. And that doubling has then sort of like stabilized. So we're seeing it actually persist even now. And we're expecting this to continue into next year, even after all of the COVID related sort of challenges subside. We are expecting e-commerce to continue to have these levels moving forward, because this is now essentially changed consumer behaviors. So consumers have kind of embraced the idea of e-commerce. You saw on the previous slide, there's 15 million new online shoppers in CPG alone. And those buyers are just not going to go away. They're not going to revert back to old behaviors. So we think this is actually going to persist. Fred, do you want to talk about this one?
Sure. Not to be unexpected, Amazon has been, head and shoulders above the rest of the online kind of channels for a long time. And you would think that may hold flat, or the other companies might take share of that while the entirety of the e-commerce landscape is expanding, but it's simply not true. Amazon continues to lead by a drastic amount. I saw a number the other day where even in this holiday season, I think it's anticipated Amazon will get 42 cents of every dollar spent during the holidays, which is an astronomical percentage. And as you look at these other kind of outlets, Walmart's gotten a ton of press about great growth in the grocery category, but this is, shop online, pick up at the store. Kroger, very similar. And Instacart is outpacing both of them, leveraging all their infrastructure, but actually delivering the convenience that now the consumer has come to expect. They don't want to leave their homes. They don't want to go out and risk anything, and for that matter. And it's really indicative of the kind of new standard that's expected in the marketplace by consumers. I want it fast. I want it simple. And they're not as price sensitive as, you may think in a traditional grocery environment. It's about convenience, and that kind of shift is meaningful.
Yeah, there's actually a few questions that have popped up. I think what around like whether the other e-commerce sites are catching up. I mean, I think one of the other things I find very interesting is not just that the sales are kind of rising for all these players, but that all of these e-commerce sites have increasingly gotten more sophisticated as well. And they're definitely doing some catch up with Amazon, but we're seeing it even in some of the requirements and policies that these other sites are putting in place to manage the quality of the creative content, or managing sort of inventory levels, or what have you. So really interesting that I think the tide is rising for all sites, all e-commerce sites, and again, that degree of sophistication is also improving.
What I've also
and it's not
noticed,
just go ahead, Pete.
yeah, the other thing I've just kind of noticed on the consumer side, my wife and I talk about this, all the time, is, we're shopping on all the platforms, but definitely heaving up on Amazon and Kroger. And, it's interesting if you look at your chart. I mean, although Kroger's starting from a low base, basically it looks like they've kind of doubled their e-commerce activity. But what's really struck out for me is the level of iteration. I feel like 5 years of rapid testing and learning and customer service back and forth has taken place in 6 months. And I feel like the experience keeps getting better, online and offline. Even the employee training, I always try to have discussions with the delivery people just to kind of better understand what's going on in the back end. And you can just tell that there is an unprecedented iterative process going on that we just haven't seen in business today. Am I exaggerating?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's been, a lot of the kind of strategic conversations we'd have with clients is about logistics, warehousing, shipping, inventory, kind of packaging, pack size, how to, optimize for profitability, how to handle customer service or content optimization. It's across every facet. There's probably 6 or 7 that we really focus on, but I'd say every facet of that is demanding innovation and improvement. You think about, a Procter & Gamble or a large, brand manufacturer. They've had, 150, 200 years to create a bulletproof kind of retail playbook. And this is stressing every damn thing in the company about, we weren't prepared for this level of shift. And it's happening also on the retailer side. It's happening in the food service and restaurant business as well. There's a lot of innovation and stuff happening that's also trickles down to ultimately, people are eating at home more. And so even, coffee shops are seeing, you're not seeing necessarily a trade-off between retail and online. It's, I can't get my Starbucks, so I'm going to get my Starbucks capsule online and make it at home. There's all those kind of iterations of consumer choices are really putting pressure on, a whole different type of infrastructure requirement in knowledge and expertise in technology. So automation, machine learning, the ability to anticipate and forecast using other indicators, I think are significant opportunity for us to start to invest in and bring products to market with.
Well, let's double click a little bit more on the Amazon multiple, because I know that's an area you've studied quite a bit, and I think you've got a slide here.
I mean, from a traffic perspective, and Kathy, if you want to obviously chime in, Kathy does a lot of this research and data. So from traffic perspective alone, the volume of, visitors to an Amazon, just dwarfs the rest of the kind of marketplace. You think about the spending that happens to acquire that traffic divided across, the millions of different sites. We call out here that Shopify alone has 1 million e-commerce sites. And you've got Amazon that's spending nearly $7 billion on marketing to buy that traffic. Where's the best place to do rapid test and learn? Where the doggone shoppers are. The other ones you can expand to once you've proven market traction or consumer adoption. But the statistics speak for themselves. It's like, how do I harness this? How do I create a playbook to magnify, or rapidly learn where I can win, and then go cascade that into the other kind of more what I would call fringe areas of opportunity of my own D2C site or other retail online sites.
And just to be really clear, we're not advocating that businesses only focus on Amazon. That's not it at all. In fact, we'd say, the best practice is get as many sites as you possibly can. The issue, though, is that often businesses are kind of looking at their e-commerce teams, and you might have a team that has, I don't know, how many do you think the average brand at Nestle had, Pete?
Oh, it was so underdeveloped. I mean, it was it was kind of like a hodgepodge until the centralized team started to really put a bit more discipline on it, but very fragmented.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, and we're talking, Nestle, right? Like maybe at most a big brand might have 5 to 10 people on e-commerce. Then you have 5 to 10 people spread over every single channel, including D2C. That's just a lot to manage. So what we're saying is businesses should be looking at the profile of e-commerce sites and making this choice very strategically, but there should be a very good reason to not be on Amazon. You really almost can't make a solid dent in e-commerce unless you're on Amazon, because Amazon's just so big and there's so many eyeballs. Or maybe put differently, I'd say that as you think about your total marketing investment, realize that if you choose to invest in other sites, you're going to have to also spend more to drive eyeballs to those other sites. So if you're going to build your own D2C, or you're going to build a Shopify site, or you're going to invest in some other channel, you most likely will have to encourage your shoppers to actually go to those sites. Whereas they're already on Amazon, and they're on Amazon 5 times a month. So it's just a very different pattern.
Well, let's stay on the new dynamics in the post-COVID era, because everybody knew that Amazon's huge, but just what else are you finding that just might force a double take?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we talked about category growth before, and I think you were chatting with someone before the webinar started about the rise of dog food or pet care products. So obviously, pet is one of the top growing categories in e-commerce for CPG. Skincare actually had a big spike. It's come back down a little bit, but that actually was really interesting. And we think skincare, I actually have a little more data on this, but some of this is an offset to the closure of some big department stores. So when Neiman Marcus went bankrupt and other stores closed, consumers had to then pivot to e-commerce to sort of fulfill those needs. We see a rise in cat food. Coffee's big, and we'll talk a little more about coffee. And then cosmetics, surprisingly, has also grown a fair bit. What I personally find really fascinating is when you dive one level deeper, right? So the previous slide I showed was total all outlet, all e-commerce channels and what we're seeing in aggregate. This is actually data looking very specifically at Amazon. So we at Hinge actually have access to one of the I'd say the state of the art data on Amazon. So Amazon doesn't publish their sales data, like Walmart doesn't either. But we do have the state of the art data source that allows us to actually pull SKU level weekly or daily data going back 2 years. So we have a ton of Amazon data. And so what you see here is actually this 50% growth in CAGR for facial moisturizers, and 81% growth in sports drinks. That one's really interesting. Sports drinks, this growth actually took me by surprise. I was not expecting it to actually outpace dog treats, but this rise in sports drinks is actually driven by consumers now kind of looking for these products that kind of mix and match. They're not just your Gatorades. They are sports drinks that have electrolytes and caffeine with collagen and probiotics, all, and maybe some protein as well. It's like as these products that now kind of span many different functional benefits and are continuing to kind of expand in that way.
Academic blend. Wow.
Exactly. And this, to your point about innovation, I mean, this is one of those places where you can be very innovative, that you can actually come up with something that tastes great and meets a very new need that, like I said, kind of blends together things that used to be kind of distinct product categories.
And just out of curiosity, since, as you see from behind me, all about, the entrepreneur, often the small entrepreneur, do you find in these emerging high growth category that a lot of the growth is coming from the long tail versus, Gatorades like cracked into sports drinks or kind of next generation? Or do you find that it's like, folks like, you or me in a garage, mix and brew and put it on Amazon?
Exactly.
And one of my buddies on the call does exactly that,
We love it. And this is actually why I do feel like e-commerce is about egalitarianism, right? It actually gives access to those small individual or independent companies to make a really big splash. So you don't have to worry about paying, slotting fees and having a big, TV marketing budget to be able to afford to sell a lot. You just have to have a great product with some great copywriting. And there's a few other things you need, but it's definitely a lot more doable. And so this growth is definitely fueled by those long tail products. In fact, I have a few examples.
Okay.
So this is actually looking at the skincare slide. So a little bit different. I'll show you after this slide. Actually, I'll just go ahead and skip forward. Let me skip forward and show you. I wanted to show you this coffee data. We were talking about the growth in ground coffee. This is actually the coffee sales data.
Wow.
You can see capsules and pods, which is basically K-cup, Nespresso, right? So that's growing by 50% CAGR. Ground coffee is growing by 161%. You can't see it very well because of the scale. Exactly, it's taking off. And that's the Starbucks dynamic that Fred was alluding to before. So you're not going to a coffee shop anymore. You're going to make it at home. And the growth of ground coffee is completely driven by these niche brands that you're referring to, Pete. It's the individual coffee shop companies that are now saying, you know what, I can't bring customers into my store, so I'm going to sell it online. And
this will be interesting to see how much of it kind of goes back because, even if everybody went back to work, my guess is that the ritual of building, making fantastic ground coffee from, a lot of these are premium brands you can buy. There's fantastic cost economics, but, will this ritual of making the coffee yourself, even independent of capsules, stick? And I would suspect that if we get back to normal, the coffee shops will have to really fight to get the consumer back.
Yeah.
And not just the coffee shop. I think that the traditional household brands will really have a fight on their hands to get into consumers' homes, right? Once you've discovered the Four Sigmatic or Kicking Horse, you develop an affinity to that. And if I don't see that in my local Kroger or whatever, when things do go back to normal, I know where to get it, right? Or I've already put it on Subscribe and Save or something like that. So it's going to be a really interesting, probably a couple of years moving forward.
Hey, real quick one here, and there's a lot of questions here, but I'll pick them that I think are kind of germane. But one from my friend Brian is, what's the impact of the Shopify Walmart partnership? Do you think there'll be enough volume there to invest the time and energy it takes to launch and manage products? And maybe you can also give whatever essential background the audience should know about that.
Yeah, I think it does have legs. I mean, you think about the fact that you have 1 million e-commerce sites via Shopify, generally with very unique products, and you've got a Walmart that wants to expand both their US and Canada marketplace. And the simplest way to acquire new vendors or new products to your platform to remain interesting with the consumer is to have a broader selection. It's a playbook directly out of Amazon's kind of history. Amazon did that with Shopify quite a while back, and the benefit is obvious. And the goal is similar to what Hinge's kind of premise is to make it simpler for product companies to launch their product and brand on additional sites. So I think it's super smart, and it will certainly help them accelerate their marketplace business.
Good question. Keep the questions coming. We'll get to more. Let's keep moving.
Well, before I leave the slide, I do want to explain what we're looking at here. Is this data, I like looking at data like this, where, yes, we can look at the total dollar share. And so not surprisingly, Starbucks is at the top. But this column, which is the average dollar sales per SKU. So it's taking all of the individual SKUs that are sold on Amazon and then taking the total, dollar sales and just dividing that dollar sales by the number of SKUs to come up with this average. And that's where you see these niche brands actually doing really well, right? Death Wish Coffee makes $500,000 just on, per SKU. And this thing, which I had never heard of before. I don't know if there's anybody out there that's buying this, but Four Sigmatic.
I've had it.
Have you? Is it any good?
I listened to Tim Ferriss, and and he's been promoting this stuff for a long time. Yeah.
So Four Sigmatic is actually a coffee that's part coffee, part mushroom, believe it or not. And they promote it. Their copywriting talks about the benefits to cognitive processing. So I guess you have better mental clarity, and I don't know, it's really interesting. But that is actually the #1 brand on Amazon for ground coffee if you were to look at it on a dollar sales per SKU basis.
Wow,
so.
That's
And it's very premium. So it's almost $20 for 12 ounces.
All right.
And so, okay, Pete, this is a slide I made for you. I mentioned before.
Got some questions, a couple questions.
Oh, all right, let's go.
I'm not the only one who's curious, but show us what you got. Go back to Pampers.
All right.
Okay.
So Pete and I started our careers on the baby care business. So those are very formative years for me. And I remember starting that business going, how many brands are there? Pete, I will ask you this. How many diaper brands are there?
Oh my gosh. Well, right now, I don't know.
Well, okay. Back then, if somebody were to ask you.
It was like a 3-horse race.
Exactly. It was Pampers, Huggies, Loves.
Yeah,
and maybe we'd throw in private label. And maybe we would talk about this Japanese brand that we were kind of keeping an eye out for. That was it, 5 brands.
And the
On Amazon,
cloth diapers.
oh yeah, and cloth diapers, which was an afterthought. Right? Now on Amazon, there are 384 brands. I'm shocked. This is a very high capital business. And I'm just talking disposable, by the way, no cloth. This is entirely disposable diapers. And the things I've flagged in here are all of these sustainable, sort of eco-friendly products. So half of the top 10 diaper brands are actually positioned as being sustainable or eco-friendly or cruelty-free. Kind of interesting.
And I've also noticed those attributes scream in the consumer reviews too. So a lot of that, a lot of those healthy or sustainable benefits are, pushing to the top of the review charts as well, which creates a whole flywheel, right? Insofar as that informs purchase.
Absolutely. Which then going back to the question you asked before about existing businesses. I mean, those established brands like Pampers and Huggies have to be looking at this going, we may need to be thinking about our business in a different way, or maybe there's some M&A implications here.
Yep, exactly. Okay.
So Pete, you mentioned you had some other questions for us.
No, I mean, are there any other categories where you've seen, I mean, this was, not a question, but a comment. I mean, this is where we struggled at Nestle because you just had this long tail. We called them ankle biter companies that were entering the food category, starting from organic, starting from green, healthy. We were positioned as, a leading nutrition, health, and wellness company, but you had this long tail of companies, really brought street cred to that proposition. People really, really believed it, and they grabbed a lot of market share. And in fact, you didn't necessarily see them in traditional advertising vehicles. You might once they become more mature, but it was typically, through really shrewd personalization at scale, great, content strategy, online commerce.
Exactly. And there you have it. That you've kind of nailed it. That this becomes then an opportunity for those products that are innovative. You can get into, you can really start to sell a lot on e-commerce in a way that's that makes traditional retail a little bit harder, right? In traditional retail, obviously, you have a finite amount of space, and you have a lot of infrastructure that can be a bit of a barrier, right? Categories are only sort of reset every 6 months and yada, yada, yada. But in the world of e-commerce, you just simply have to have a great product with great content and copywriting. And so long as that product can be found in this endless aisle, you've got a business. And so this is really something where we're starting to see all kinds of niche opportunities, whether it's sustainability or organic or, back to my sports drink example with products that just contain lots of different combinations of ingredients that you wouldn't have thought of before. All of these kinds of things are really starting to break out.
Yeah. The other thing I would just add here is that the other thing I've noticed is that, it's unique about the e-commerce channels. They just give you a lot of different categories of content that you can contribute. And we often talk about the reviews, but there's the video demo, there's the customer service channels. And I've also found that the scrappy organic brands, they're just wickedly creative in how they use content and how they do video. And I think sometimes I feel like they dance circles around the big brands that are just so beholden to traditional methods of marketing. And, and they're, it's almost like the organic players are just taking every advantage. Amazon is giving me this amazing playing field of putting up content. And for a lot of traditional brands, that's kind of foreign territory. I mean, they're making headway, but it's just, this is where it gets really interesting. And if you want to be inspired by, creative storytelling, look at some of the videos that the organic players are putting on Amazon or even Walmart. It's very resourceful. It's not overproduced. It feels genuine. And again, if the name of the game is building advocacy and getting the reviews, which
Yeah.
forms the link love and trips the algorithm, it's like, that's the way to start.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And it's,
you get to build your audience before you have to build a relationship with a retailer, right? And so you get to hold true to your core beliefs, the essence of what your brand is, and establish that out in the world versus I set it on Target shelf or Walmart shelf, and I hope a customer walks by and says, what the hell is this? You get to create that identity and engage the consumer in a whole different depth. And to your point, Pete, you go from being a kind of inanimate physical object to having a true personality via video, via social engagement and things like that. It's really transformative. And you'll see some examples of that on, if we have time, some of the kind of emerging brands that we've seen harness that and do a really great job.
Yeah, let's talk more about innovation, because again, I want this to inspire even the, the innovator that's not entering the food category or Amazon, but just, I mean, every entrepreneur is working with limited budget, needs to manage cash, needs to make the penny scream, needs to prove the folks that might ultimately fund them that they're incredibly resourceful. So let's talk about some of these, let's talk more about innovation on the platform.
Sure. I mean, here's some great examples of brands who have done a fantastic job. Nut Pods, as an example, we had the luxury of meeting their founder last year. And the lady who founded the company did so because she was allergic to dairy, right? So she created a coconut coffee mixer and launched it on Amazon and built that business over about 4 years to the point where every major retailer in the country was begging her to let them buy it. Now they're in every Kroger, they're in Walmart, Whole Foods, Target, just about any grocer in the country. But it started by establishing exactly what you just described, Pete, of I created a product, I know my niche, my customer, because I am them, and they know how to communicate the value proposition in a unique and valuable way. And I think they just last year closed around for basically to be able to produce more inventory. I think they closed 50 million last year to continue to expand that retail footprint. That's for Nut Pods.
Right.
Death Wish that you saw. Yeah, it's phenomenal, but it was also smart. We talked with her about this and they did their homework, identified an opportunity where there wasn't anyone playing in the creamer space. Nestle should go buy them right now and do something really to leverage their scale, right? Focus that you see here was a brand started by an optometrist. He's going through med school and stuff like that and got tired of getting the jitters from coffee. You just couldn't drink coffee all day when you're doing 24-hour rounds. And so they created a caffeinated sparkling water with a very lean team, 2 or 3 people, built a couple $1 million business on Amazon, and then picked up 3,000-4,000 retail outlets simply because they had evidence to prove there was market demand, great customer advocacy, huge, engagement. Those kind of things are possible when you really focus your time and effort on a specific area. When you talk about growth hacking and stuff like that, the idea of having a good feeling about a product or something fitting a niche, the way to truly growth hack is to do the homework. And the availability of data is so significant that anyone can harness it. You've heard for years about brands, concerned about Amazon getting sales data and knowing what products to create to compete with them. Well, that data is available to anyone who really wants to go subscribe to it. And we work with clients all the time to help them get that idea of where to play, how to win, and does the market or product opportunity fit that specific brand or manufacturer's capabilities? And then is it market viable? Very similar to the kind of design thinking of consumer experience, solving the problem, and then is it commercially viable? Same thing in this respect to product innovation and launching. We could tell you where to play, how to win, and for, how to do it intelligently. What's it going to cost? What's the marketing investment? What's the time to success or kill it? But largely you get to de-risk that with the amount of data and information available to you. And the smart players are doing that.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So how do you assess e-commerce viability?
You know, you can identify demand or white space. Depends on, you know, kind of what's your school of thought, supply or demand. You know, there's a lot of kind of, to Kathy's point, a lot of ankle biter products out there that are kind of white label other people's products, but true kind of product innovation and capabilities. You're able to identify what you have in your portfolio. Is there a good fit for it? In what channel or what region or geography in the world? So you could do those kind of demand tests and look for those signals, and then back into, based on the pricing, all those kind of things. Is it commercially viable for you and your business and your current construct? And then, not to oversimplify it, but it's about content, and having super efficient marketing so that every dollar that you spend is acquiring customers, not just paying for the customer that already knows who you are. It's a very simple right here, because I know we don't have a lot of time, but that's ultimately a very high level playbook for how to go fight and win.
And this would be sort of our short list of KPIs if we were to think about kind of using Amazon for growth hacking. It would be looking, number one, at sales benchmarking. So kind of looking at if there are products that are similar, we would benchmark directly to those. If they're not, then we would look for analogs. So other new product launches in this space in recent years. So sales benchmarking, sales per SKU. We'd look at conversion rates. So that's a really great KPI as a measure of consumer interest. So when presented with the idea, how many people actually click the buy box, right? Brand switching. So there's a lot of data, especially on Amazon, maybe to a lesser degree, some of the other platforms, around what other things consumers are putting in their basket and what they're clicking between. So if they are looking at your product, but actually end up buying something else, what are those things, right? So kind of assessing that competitive switching behavior, and then repeat purchases. There's a whole bunch of different ways to accelerate repeat on e-commerce. Obviously, we've talked about subscribe and save, which is an Amazon feature that basically kind of allows consumers to get a small discount for having this sort of auto replen. And then there's voice activated replenishment, right? Amazon Dash, where you could just say to your Alexa device, you know, put this back on my grocery list, and you've got it back again. So there's lots of ways within e-commerce that actually drives this ongoing repeat. Yeah. And then that repeat measure can be benchmarked as well.
So tons of potential here. So I want to get a few more questions. First off, this is fantastic, and I could talk all day, and I think I want to do a part 2 already. But I want to hear a few questions. A couple of people have asked about Amazon Explorer, so I'd love to get your perspective there. My dear friend Jack Geiger has asked about, have we seen an uptick in cause-related brands? And I think we partly answered that before in the context of the growth curves with sustainability, but definitely feel free to add to that. And then I think a very good question around how does Instagram perform as an acquisition channel? There must be some rationality to so much money going into that. So tackle any one or all of those.
Well, I'll start with Amazon Explorer, and then Fred can bat one. But I'd say it's a little too soon to know about Amazon Explorer. I think it's only launched in the past couple of months. We are seeing a number of virtual experience opportunities, not just on Amazon. There's Facebook. There's others that have offered similar kinds of things. I think that is kind of a TBD. But I think, obviously I like the fact that marketers are looking at Amazon Live or video or other kinds of interactive means of kind of reaching their consumers to give them that sort of pseudo experiential experience.
Okay, great. How about Instagram?
I think Instagram's a great channel for acquisition. You know, we're particularly, I think there's two sides, right? You've got the brand aspect of it, and then secondly, the influencer component. And the influencer still, you know, seems to hold true if you're a known brand. You know, I say that in the sense of, you know, not many people care if Kim Kardashian bought whatever toenail polish. I think I could be wrong, but you still got to go validate that nail polish is of, you know, consistent with what you want, and the quality, or kind of a clean product. And I think that kind of ties back a little bit to Jack Geiger's question. And Jack, I know we haven't talked in a long time. Hope you're well. That there is this affinity towards doing good, right, and giving back something, and that always kind of resonates with people, to the point where there is probably a tipping point where it's overdone, in the sense of that's not the actual mission of the company, or it has to be actually 100% authentic, and that has to kind of be at the core and essence of that company's identity, I think. But yes, Instagram's a huge, you know, acquisition opportunity. We just talked with, you know, a client we're engaged with down in Florida, where, you know, Jimmy Buffett posted something on Instagram, and, you know, they sold 22,000 units in 24 hours, which is, you know, a great testament to that. And there's way more examples of similar types of virality, where someone has an audience, where the product is relevant, and it's not just a kind of random endorsement. It has to be consistent with what that audience is looking for.
Fantastic. And then, what good question here. What's the difference between growth hacking and design thinking? I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you guys. Kathy, you got it. Yeah, you can take a second, or go for it. Anybody.
Yeah, I was kind of touching on that before, of, you know, how do you go to market, right? And the concept of design thinking is that customer experience, problem solving, and the commercial viability. And then the hacking is truly, in my mind, it's being smart, and making smart bets. It doesn't have to be a bet or a gamble. You can be well informed, and then have the kind of defined processes to do this again and again and again. Just the volume of data to inform yourself about what products to create, what trends to follow, what price points to launch at, what some marketing investment need to be, what technology to implement. It's easy to identify all those things in advance and launch like a brand new product in 10 to 30 days, and get market traction in that same period of time, where it's like, okay, we've got, you know, for a small business, 5,000 or 10,000 in sales within 30 days, and then define the benchmarks to go expand to the other channels. The growth hacking concept of acquiring then that sales data and using that leverage as leverage to go into other channels just makes you a smarter entrepreneur in how you get to market and how you get adopted by kind of the mass and the scale, and to go help raise more money or whatever you might need. It doesn't have to be kind of pie in the sky. We're going to sell into $1 billion market and go ask for money. You can actually go do it for very low cost. And when I say low cost, less than 50 grand, launch a new product, get market traction, and then start to expand from there.
And then what about, you know, one of the questions I didn't get to, but I think it's really, we've talked a lot about almost like that front end innovation, the growth hacking, the kind of, you know, learn fast without spending a lot of money. But what about, like, what are the hurdles for companies to rapidly scale? So, you know, you're on to something, Kill or Death or whatever the crazy coffee brand, you know, okay, people love it, but how do you scale it?
You know, the beautiful thing is that if you have the capacity to manufacture, is you effectively can scale or buy infrastructure as a service. You can buy people and services and technology that allow you to still operate your business with 3 to 4 people. And then you hire, you know, a 3PL that will do fulfillment to every, you know, outlet in the country, whether D2C or something like that. The ability, you know, really to harness that is identifying, you know, key partners that are incentivized or success-based, meaning You don't necessarily have to spend $1 million to stand up a warehouse. Warehouses exist, and there are millions of people that work in them. It's again goes back to when you talk about the growth hacking and the ability to leverage what already exists. There's a lot of people with lazy assets, if you will, and your ability to get into that and to help them monetize theirs, and you mutually win, I think is a good kind of solution for that.
Let me start my last question to Kathy. First off, I appreciate everybody kind of sitting in on this, and we'll make the transcript available. So definitely share. I think there's a lot of latency value here, but Kathy, going back to kind of our experience at P&G, and we lived and breathed concept testing, and we're in a community of incredible consumer insights experts. And do you think there's a possibility, with the likes of Amify, Hinge, probably many others? I think a lot of agencies are starting to get really good at this. Do you think there's a possibility of us building a kind of a real competitive platform in our region, building on these skills, being close to the plains? So if you're kind of selling on Amazon, you not only there's a marketing efficiency, there's an insights efficiency, but there's also just, I'm closer to the plains. And I've had some entrepreneurs say that that's like a 5 to 10%, just a cost advantage. But, do you think that we could build a real competitive advantage in Cincinnati in launching products with these skills, even if the end goal isn't marketing on Amazon? I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get more products out the gate a heck of a lot faster? I want 1,000 Brian Crops, not just a couple of them out there. But do you think we're onto something?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that this is a great way for brands to kind of think about e-commerce as this sort of test and learn. We're talking about test and learn. Like, it's definitely a platform that allows businesses to really assess their viability and then accelerate their growth. And I think right here in Cincinnati, we have all the assets necessary and the brain trust, right? So the expertise and the skills and the services to kind of make that a reality. So I'm excited about that, Pete.
And Fred, you flew back and forth from Seattle. Seattle's a pretty cool town, but you're in Cincinnati. I'm assuming you agree.
I 100% agree for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the investor community and stuff like that here. We've had some great ideas about how to rapidly test and prototype products, bring them to market quickly. The other thing is just the community, philosophy here. If you ask for help in the culture here in Cincinnati, you'll likely get it. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, that's just part of that Midwest kind of heart, and it's a beautiful thing. So I have no doubt. We've helped, probably hundreds of brands at this point, and I can only see it expanding from here.
Excellent. Well, I kind of wish I missed you guys. I met you guys like the year I got the Nestle. I probably would have gotten a bigger bonus, but I'm so grateful that you're here. I love what you're doing. Love to figure out how we can forge an even stronger connection with our startup community. Test and learn is everything. Keep sending the fascinating consumer insights our way, or at least send it to me. I love that stuff. And I'll give you extra bonus points if you do send more on sustainability, because that's going to be a big focus for us going into 2021. So, Kathy and Fred, thank you very much. Catherine, who just rejoined me on the marketing side, thanks so much. Good to have you back in town. Thanks for making this run really well. And to all the attendees, including, I noticed my dear friend Barbara Vita from Italy is on. We have a global audience, I'm proud to say. Thanks for tuning in, and send feedback. I want to do this a lot more. So take care and have a wonderful holiday, everybody.